So Gavin Newsom has recently made some really big headlines because he's trying to get reparations for American descendants of slaves in California in the amount of $223,000 per person. That's a lot of money, even, I guess, by California standards as well. So, like I said, $223,000 for American descendants of slaves, people whose ancestors were in America and who were slaves. So it's ruffled feathers. People are like, what in the world? Like, there's no way that we should be paying reparations. I wasn't a part of slavery. I didn't own slaves, and no black people who are currently alive have ever been enslaved. Therefore, reparations should be completely off the table, and it's a bunch of bunk. It makes absolutely no sense. But I want you to listen with an open heart, because there might be another side of the coin. So just hear me out. Thank you for being here at 2 Cents. This is where we talk about both sides of the coin. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. I would love to hear your thoughts regarding my video in the comments. But in order to give an informed decision, have an informed opinion, you have to listen to the whole video. So stick with me for the whole video, okay? Reparations is not a new thing in America, and it's not a new thing on a global spectrum either. There are multiple people groups that have received reparations. I want to give you a few examples. And as you listen to each example, I want you to assess whether or not you agree or disagree with these people groups receiving reparations. Listen to the wrongdoing, but then also listen to the compensation that they were given for the wrongdoing, and judge in your heart whether or not you think they should have gotten it. And if you would take the money back, basically, if you could. So let's start off with the Jewish community. Reparations agreement between Israel and the Federal Republic of Germany. It was signed on September 10th of 1952 and entered into force on March 27th, 1953. According to the agreement, West Germany was to pay Israel for the costs of resettling so great a number of uprooted and destitute Jewish refugees after the war, and to compensate individual Jews via the Conference on Jewish Material Claims against Germany for losses in Jewish livelihood and property resulting from Nazi persecution. So how much money has been paid in reparations to the Jewish community? I'm glad you asked. So since 1952, Germany has paid $79.7 billion in reparations. Billion with a B, okay? Think about that. So the country that was responsible for the atrocity has paid for reparations not only to Holocaust survivors, but children of Holocaust survivors. So people who were not in the Holocaust are receiving financial compensation in some form for what Germany did. Question: do you agree with that? Yes or no? No vague, broad answers, just yes or no. Do you agree that the Jewish people should have gotten reparations from Germany? If your answer is yes, okay, that's understandable. If your answer is no, you need to be able to verbalize why you don't think that they should have gotten it, okay? So, $79.7 billion. Next people group. Japanese Americans. So after Pearl Harbor, Japanese American citizens, they're American citizens who were Japanese, were rounded up and put into internment camps because people were spooked because of that. And they thought that these Japanese people could be plants, basically. So they rounded up and imprisoned them. And these were American citizens. So they received reparations for the wrongdoing that happened to them, for being in prison for, I should have looked up how long they were in there. By 1992, the U.S. government eventually dispersed more than $1.6 billion, which is the equivalent to $3.67 billion in 2021, in reparations to 82,219 Japanese Americans who had been incarcerated. Okay? So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the Japanese Americans should have gotten reparations? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, kind of makes sense. It's very understandable. They were uprooted and their lives were put on hold and they were guilty until proven innocent. They gave them money. I think it was $20,000 per person. And that was back decades and decades ago. So adjusted for inflation, that's a lot more now. Next people group, Native Americans. Native American reparations refer to the United States government's attempt to right the historical wrongdoing and mistreatment of a population. The American government has compensated Native American tribes about $1.3 billion between 1946 and 1978. There are a lot of programs that are specifically for Native American people, like for no other group, not minorities, but specifically for Native American people. So we're talking about housing, healthcare. I have friends who have gotten like literally free houses, free, not paying for healthcare, not paying for education, as a form of compensation for what has been done to their ancestors. Okay, so altogether a year, it's about $20 billion a year, give or take a few hundred million, that the federal government allocates to American Indian tribes and communities every single year. That is for that particular people group. So, based on what they have experienced, in 2015, the presidential's fiscal budget request was for $19.6 billion cumulative dollars through all government agencies. And this is specifically for the Native American community, okay? Not minorities. So, do you think that Native Americans should receive reparations? I know I'm friends with people who are in the Native American community who receive payments. There's two dudes that I know, and they're getting basically quarterly payments. And I'm just like, wow, that's cool, man. Like, just cha-ching, let's go. But that's just for them, and it's understandable, right? So do you agree with Native American individuals getting reparations in the form of all the programs, the housing, the free healthcare, all that kind of stuff? And money? Do you agree with it? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, it's understandable. If the answer is no, you got to verbalize why. So now we've gone over 3 different people groups, all of which have received reparations, all of which from a logical standpoint, it makes sense to me why they have received reparations. So I want us to look through that same lens and now look at Black people. Don't log off. You did it for 3 people groups already. Don't go nowhere. So after the Emancipation Proclamation, President Lincoln, you ever heard of 40 acres and a mule? These are the reparations that ex-slaves were supposed to get. They got a bunch of pastors, Black pastors who were ex-slaves, and they basically asked them, what do you want for compensation for what you guys went through? They didn't ask for money. They asked for land. They wanted a means to create generational wealth. Land and a mule represented work. It did not represent a handout. They didn't want a handout. They wanted land to plant, because that's what they've been doing. They've been planting and picking cotton for centuries. So that's something that they were trained at. So they wanted land to be able to plant and sell their crops, and land to be able to pass down to future generations, build generational wealth. So they didn't ask for a handout. They asked for work. Okay. They were like, cool, we're going to do it. There's also going to be a certain spot of land that was only for Black people. After President Lincoln got assassinated, it was off the table, and nobody, it was no longer a thing. And it's like, well, you're free now. You're good. Keep in mind that it was illegal for Black people to read for centuries. So you have an uneducated group of people who have not accrued any generational wealth, who have been treated like animals, who have encountered psychological trauma for centuries, who have been raised to believe that they are animals, who are now booted out and told you're free and all things are equal. And they didn't get the reparations that they were promised. So that can has been kicked down the road for centuries effectively. And here we are in 2022, and Black people still have not received reparations. And when I say reparations, keep in mind the same energy we have for the other reparations. It was money and programs that were specifically for compensating these people groups for wrongdoing. I'm not talking welfare, I'm not talking stuff like that is general and is for poor people. I'm talking about money that is specifically for this group for the sole purpose of repaying them for the wrongdoing that was done to them. Okay. So there are no Native Americans right now who were the original Native Americans who got ran off their land. Okay. There's not many Holocaust survivors left, but that money that has been pumped into those communities has an impact, and it can be passed down. The free housing. Okay. Housing is generational wealth. That's something that you can pass down to future generations. It develops equity. So if you said yes to those first three people groups regarding reparations, but then we get to Black people and all of a sudden there's something in your heart that says, ask yourself why. And it can't be just some broad, general, whatever the reason. Like, you got to have some valid, concrete, measurable, observable points. Okay. Especially if you said yes to those first three, you got to answer why. Why wouldn't you say yes to the fourth one? So if you're saying yes to three, but saying no to one, would that not be, could it possibly be viewed as a form of discrimination? Discrimination is basically singling one out amongst many. So if you're cool with three, but you're not cool with that one, help me understand why. Put it in the comments, and be respectful if you do put it in the comments, please. Because I know this is a touchy issue, but I want to hear where people's minds are at on this. I'm going to make a future video about reparations, or I'm going to go more into detail, because I think a lot of people get hung up on the money. Like, well, there's not enough money. There's no way that we can't even afford it. I'm not going to pay for it. Who do you think? And I'm going to go into more detail on this. So subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my content, because I'm making a video on this in the future. Who do you think paid for the reparations for Native Americans? Who do you think paid for reparations for Japanese internment camp prisoners? Who do you think paid for it? Think the politicians paid out of their own pockets? No. American citizens did. Okay. So those Japanese American citizens were taxpayers. So effectively, they contributed to their own reparations to an extent. You are paying for reparations right now, because it's in the fiscal budget. Like, there's like $20 billion a year that are going straight to the Native American tribes for what the American government did to them. And it's just a part of American history. And I've said this to someone on a Facebook post recently, the part of love is acceptance of flaws. So if you love this country, two things can be true at the same time, y'all. Like, if you love this country, you have to accept the history, even the nasty history, the history that is not attractive. Okay. There's things that happen in this country that weren't good, and that's okay. Like, it's reality. Just because you acknowledge a historical wrongdoing does not mean that you hate this country. It doesn't mean that. Now, turning a blind eye on reality and history and things that actually happen, it's not a good look, because people know it happened, and people in these groups, like, we know. You think you can convince Native American people that their people haven't been done wrong? You think you can convince Holocaust survivors that they haven't been done wrong? You think you can convince people who are Japanese Americans who were in those internment camps that they weren't done wrong? You can't convince them. So when we come to Black people, American descendants of slaves, I'm not talking about African immigrants. I'm talking about people whose lineage is linked to slavery, whose ancestors were slaves in America. You think you can convince Black people that we haven't been done wrong? So it's not necessarily like a hand, like, gimme, gimme, gimme. There's precedent for it. And there's things, in the video, I'm going to talk more about the impact that slavery had on a generational basis, and how current day American descendants of slaves can be impacted by things that happened centuries ago. And it makes sense. If you hear me out, it makes a whole lot of sense from a logical basis. So yeah, I'd like to hear what you think. Put it in the comments, and please be respectful. I have the ability to hide your comments. If you start getting nasty, I'll hide it. I know so you can't comment on my page. People have been doing very well up to this point on these tough issues, and I'm proud of you for doing that. But keep it up. Don't come in here complaining and calling people out of their name and stuff. Don't do that. We're all grown adults. We can discuss difficult topics in a civil manner. That's how we progress as humanity anyways. So thank y'all so much for being here at 2 Cents. This is where we talk about both sides of the coin. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time. Bye.